My husband caught me arm in arm with Slash Affair in public and attacked him, then went home and did this. I was careless, and it was really so stupid of me to go outside my marriage and commit adultery. The consequences that I had faced after I was caught by my husband that I was having an affair outside our relationship were heartless and demonic. I didn't know that I'd been married to the devil himself for years. I really thought he was a sweet, loving, and caring guy, but I guess I was wrong. Have you ever found yourself in a situation that you never thought you'd be in? I won't deny and say I was right for doing what I did because I was wrong, and I paid greatly for that. I had never thought that one day I would actually find myself in a demeaning situation. I really don't know what had really pushed me to another man's arms and why I had taken that selfish and destroying decision. My husband's fault was loving me and taking care of me. Sometimes being a housewife is kind of boring, but I was enjoying it because my husband was taking good care of me financially. If I were to try and explain why I cheated, surely you wouldn't believe nor understand my explanation, but I think greed and desire is what drove me to cheat on my husband. I mean, I was getting everything, and my husband was trying by all means to make sure that I was getting everything, and even sexually I was not suffering. Instead of being a loyal partner to my husband, I decided to be a dog and go outside my marriage to look for my desires somewhere else. But the outcome of my abomination was not really nice, and he made sure that I regret every single thing that I had ever done to him in our marriage. My husband, Jim Carson, male 32, and I, female 32, met at one of the radio stations in Atlanta. He had come to the station for an interview for his phenomenal real estate and construction business. He also sponsored a few nursing homes and children's homes in Georgia, Atlanta. His work was so amazing. I was the radio personality at that time, and I was the one to interview him. After the interview, well, it was also my time to knock off. Mind you, that time I was on an evening drive from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. After I had knocked off, I asked him to wait for me because I wanted to ask for a sponsorship for my non-governmental organization, NGO. We talked a bit about my NGO, and he gave me his business card saying I should call during business hours. I took the card, but I didn't want to speak to any other person but him. So the following day, I called the number on the card and told my request, and I was scheduled for an appointment to speak with Jim. 2 days later, I went to my meeting with Jim, and we spoke about my wishes and how I wanted to help the community and how much I wanted the sponsor for it. Since then, we exchanged numbers. He told me that we would talk on the phone, and I was more than happy to hear that. We communicated a lot through the phone, and we were slowly getting close. After some weeks, he actually sponsored my NGO, and I couldn't be happier. He had once taken me to the orphanage that he was sponsoring, and I would say that the guy's work was truly amazing. One thing I loved about Jim was that he was so down to earth. The things he was doing for the people, he was doing them because he loved doing them, and he wasn't a social media person. So whatever that he was doing, yes, he was taking pictures with the children and their helpers or nurses, but you would never find even one picture of what he is doing on social media. He made me believe that if you want to help someone, make sure you help them with an open and cleansed heart. Never try and help someone, then take pictures of what you did and flaunt it all over the internet. I was really moved by his humbleness and determination to help others. Months later, we had become close. He was a good advisor. Whenever I would be either confused or in need of some guidance and advice, I knew that he was available for me no matter what. I knew that I had someone I could trust and be free to talk to him about anything, whether it was bothering me or making me happy. He used to help me brainstorm some problem-solving techniques for my NGO, and I really loved every minute that I would spend with him. You know when someone knows the real you within a few months of knowing each other? That was Jim. He knew me from inside and outside. I had learned a lot during the time of our friendship until we got married. Jim is a very smart man with so many talents and a great mind. He is business-minded, and I like that about him because he would always chase the plan that he has or the dream that he had. We were friends for over 7 months, and I would say that time gave me a lot of opportunity to learn about Jim. Then later we got into a relationship. We were so inseparable. We would go together to visit the homes that he was sponsoring and help those who were in need. After we had officialized our relationship, we enjoyed our dating phase for a couple of months up until he proposed on the 14th of February. I won't lie and say I wasn't happy because I was ecstatic. It felt like a dream come true. I mean, I had found my true love, my mentor, my best friend. I had found a whole package in one person, and I wouldn't ask for another partner either than him. Jim gave me everything and more. Then we got married during summer holidays in June, and I was the happiest girl alive. Our marriage was a bliss. I had everything that I had asked for. I had a loving, caring, and supportive husband. A few months later in our marriage, Jim and I had a talk about starting a family, and I was more than ready to start my own family with Jim and have our own mini-us. But in order for that to happen, Jim had asked me to take an early retirement at work, saying that I should get enough rest so that my body can be able to carry a child. I knew that if I were to retire or resign from my job early, Jim was going to take good care of me. Already I was getting enough allowance from Jim for just being his wife. I was no longer using my work salary because my husband had been taking care of me financially. I never lacked anything, from intimacy to pampering, Jim's time and attention. Till today, I'm still trying to figure out what drove me to be living two lives while I had everything and more that I was getting from Jim. Time passed. I was starting to get bored in the house. Jim was always busy at work, and it wasn't easy for him to give me much attention anymore because his construction business had been growing so fast and getting so many projects to do. They had a lot of building to do since they are in building construction. I was happy that my husband's businesses were going well because it meant more money was coming in, but it was really affecting our relationship, and our relationship had started to be all about him and his work and the projects that they were doing. I won't lie, it was kind of boring sometimes to me because it was always about work. Even if we were on a dinner table, he would be speaking about his upcoming project and the houses that he has to renovate for his real estate business. My husband is very determined and a hard worker, but sometimes I would miss him, you know. I would miss his touch, his jokes, and everything. One day I downloaded a dating app because I was bored and I needed someone who can give me some action. I was tired of helping myself sexually. So as I was scrolling, I became a match with some handsome guy whose name was Eric Mayer, male, 33. When I looked through the guy's profile, I was really taken. I mean, he was what I needed in a man. He was slim fit with fair complexion and sexy green eyes. He made me feel wet just by looking at his pictures. So the guy sent me a text and we started talking through the app. Our conversations were flowing. It was like we had known each other for a very long time. We had chemistry, the connection was there. We spoke for a couple of days and we had also exchanged numbers, so we were chatting on WhatsApp Messenger mostly. We had done some video calls, well, not just normal video calls, but those nasty and freaky video calls. I had thought that that man was just for me. Eric and I had the same desires and we connected in a way that I can't even explain. Weeks passed. Eric and I had met twice, and to say I was taken by the guy's action would be an understatement. He was on top of this world. I'm not saying my husband didn't have action, but he was always busy, and I was not getting anything from him anymore except for his money and a few kisses here and there, but it was seriously boring. I needed some intimacy, someone who would be able to take me to another planet and make me see the ninth cloud. Since Jim wasn't there to help me with my desires, I used Eric for my satisfaction. The guy made sure that I was overly satisfied and I had reached my climax. That's how our affair started. Well, we started calling our thing an affair when we had seen each other for the third time, and both of us couldn't get enough of each other. I was so much into the moment to the point that I even lived a double life. I loved my husband a lot, but I loved what Eric was doing to me more. I had been living a double life, sneaking around behind my husband's back with a man named Eric. Their affair had been going on for months, hidden beneath layers of lies and deceit. I knew that if Jim was to find out, a lot would be destroyed and lost. I know what I did was really a selfish and greedy move, but my affair with Eric was only for intimacy and nothing more. Yes, there were feelings involved, but I couldn't love him just like I loved my husband. Eric and I, the way we were so careless, we didn't even think of the consequences of our actions. We were just caught in our own bubble of being intimate. I really loved how Eric was making me feel worthy of his time and attention. I know that Jim was always at work because he wanted us to have a good life, and so that he would be able to take care of me without any struggles. So one fateful day, as Eric and I were strolling through the park, lost in our own little world, we failed to notice my husband Jim approaching from the opposite direction. As we turned a corner, there he was, standing right in front of us, his expression a mix of shock and betrayal. The shock on his face quickly turned into anger as he confronted us, feeling betrayed and hurt by my actions. The way he was so angry, well, even angry is a small word. He was enraged and unable to control his emotions. He lashed out at my affair, Eric resulting in a physical altercation that left us all shaken and embarrassed. I didn't know what to do nor say. I knew that if I were to say something, I would say something wrong and it would anger him more. I tried separating him from Eric because he was attacking Eric and was hurting him so bad. People were looking at us like they were given a free show. Jim was so heartless, and the way he was angry, he wasn't stoppable. I tried to take him away from Eric, but he was just strong to a point that I even gained myself a fist unintentionally. When people saw that Jim was doing too much to a guy, They interfered and separated Jim from Eric. Eric was also fighting back, but Jim was overpowering him. I didn't know the kind of power that Jim had that day. I tried talking to him and told him that it wasn't what it looked like, every guilty person's statement, but he just glanced at me and told me that I would find him at home. He then left me there to imagine. After the chaotic scene, we all went our separate ways, but the tension and guilt weighed heavily on my mind as I made my way back home. My mind kept wondering what was waiting for me at home, and I was kind of scared to go back home, especially when Jim was still angry. As much as I was really scared to face Jim, but I knew that I had to somehow, so I would get over it and move on. I had a hope that he would believe my lie and forgive me. I didn't want to lose my husband just because of a fling and desires, but I guess sometimes hopes are only meant to stay as hopes. As I entered our empty house, the reality of what had just transpired hit me like a ton of bricks. When I got home, I couldn't believe my eyes. I was met by smoke that was coming from the car garage. I really thought that maybe Jim had done something to himself, so I rushed to where the smoke was coming from. When I reached the garage, I saw Jim holding all my new clothes. Well, the clothes that were bought by his money, he was actually setting them on fire. I tried asking him to stop and somehow tried to take them off him, but he just slapped me and told me to go inside and take all my old rags and go out of his house. I couldn't believe what Jim was really doing. Sure, I had done him wrong in the worst way possible, and what I did was really unforgivable, but he didn't have a right to do what he did. He may have attacked Eric, but he wasn't supposed to burn my clothes just because they were bought with his money. And to think that was not the worst thing that he had done. I really thought burning my clothes would be enough for him to satisfy his angry heart. Little did I know that the man of the house would actually do something bigger and more heartless than just burning my clothes. A few days later, I went back to my apartment that I had lived in when I was still working at the radio station. I respected Jim's wish of me moving out of the house, but to say I was heartbroken would be an understatement. I was shattered, I had no clothes, and I only had my old clothes which were no longer fitting my body. As I was in the apartment, I had bought a few groceries that would last me for a couple of days until Jim calmed down and maybe consider fixing our marriage. I missed him so much, and I had realized that being away from him made me feel incomplete. 1 month later, my landlord came to me and asked for the rent money for the month. Yep, I had stayed there for the whole month, still waiting for Jim's call maybe. I had tried calling him and sent him so many text messages, hoping that he would get back to me at least. I told the landlord that I would go to the shops, then I would withdraw the rent money. When I got into the grocery store, I had already brought everything that I needed, and when I got to the pay register, I got the shock of my life. As I was taking out my items on the trolley, I tried swiping my card, but the card just declined. I tried several times and even tried other cards to see if they would go through, but no, they all declined. I even went to the ATM, but I only got an ATM slip. It was really frustrating and embarrassing because I had made other people wait in line for like 15 minutes while I was trying to withdraw the cash, but failing. I then decided to go to the bank's branch to find out what was happening and why my money was not coming out in all my cards. When I got to the bank, I was assisted, and I was told the most unbelievable thing ever. I was told that my accounts had no money, and the other that Jim had opened for me was blocked and reported as a fraudster account. I just couldn't believe Jim. Mind you, that time I had no food in the apartment, I haven't paid rent, meaning my life was just F************ D up. Jim managed to ruin my life just because of an affair that I had with Eric. Worst part is that he didn't even want to give me a chance to explain myself, even though he wasn't going to believe me, but I felt the need to explain myself to him so he could understand why I had done what I did. I was feeling neglected for heaven's sake, and it was all his fault. I'm not saying he wasn't supposed to focus on his work and his projects, but he had to remember that he had a wife that he had left in the house that also needed his time and attention. I needed him. I needed his attention, time, and affection, but he wasn't there. I was faced with the aftermath of my choices and the consequences of my infidelity, feeling a mix of regret, shame, and confusion. I just didn't know how to recover from the whole thing. Jim had hammered the last nail in my life. He had completely destroyed me, and I had not come back from it. I didn't even have any cash on me. I knew there and then that I had to go back home. I called my mother and asked her to fetch me. Unfortunately, she wasn't around, but I was lucky enough because she sent me some cash that would take me from Georgia to Virginia Highland. My heart was so shattered. I even thought of doing the worst to myself, but I would think of my mother and how she would feel. My mother was really disappointed in me when she learnt about what had really happened between Jim and I. She asked me once, but I didn't give her straight answers. I told her lies. I just couldn't bring myself to tell her what had really happened to my marriage. I think she called Jim and asked what had really happened between us because a day after I had told her the lies. She came to my room with rage written all over her face. She was super angry and disappointed. She asked why I had acted like a hook and went outside my marriage and committed adultery. The worst part, gallivant with my affair in public, knowing very well that my husband is a traveling man. He goes everywhere for his businesses. I knew that what I did would have consequences and bad outcomes, but I wasn't expecting something so big. My life was literally ruined, but I guess it was karma, and it had visited my doorstep earlier than I had expected. I know I had hurt Jim in the worst way possible, but did he really have to avenge himself like this? I stayed in my room for months trying to get to terms with what had happened to my marriage. 2 weeks after I had been home, a postman had delivered an envelope on my doorstep, and I just couldn't believe my eyes. I had hoped that maybe Jim would come back to his senses since he hadn't sent the divorce papers. So he waited for weeks to send divorce papers after he had made sure that I was down and out. I was really shattered. I was depressed. I didn't even want to face the outside. All I wanted was to disappear at least and go to the place where no one knows me. I spent months indoors and decided that it was time to move on. With my mother's help, of course, she got me help, a therapist that spent a lot of time trying to make me open up about my marriage troubles. It took her 2 weeks trying to make me open up, and I was really grateful for her patience. I eventually opened up and tried to let go of the past and focus on the future. In a moment of clarity, I knew I had to make things right and face the music for my actions. A few weeks later, I was slowly getting back to being my old self, and I was trying to pick up the pieces that had been broken. I knew that in order for me to move on, I had to start by forgiving myself and forgive Jim. So I sat down in my room and wrote a heartfelt letter to my husband, pouring out my remorse and asking for his forgiveness. I know that I had done him wrong, and I was really regretting my actions. I was driven by greed and desires that clouded my eyes and made me take bad decisions. It was really a lot to take in, but I knew that bit by bit I had to move on and live my life to the fullest. I had even applied for jobs in different radio stations. I had a hope that with the experience and the years that I had spent at Atlanta radio station, they would work in my favor and maybe get me a space. My mother was the support system that I had needed and my strength to get me going. I would never trade that woman for nothing. She is truly my rock and my fortress. She made me believe that everything would be okay and I would heal eventually. My separation with Jim really destroyed me. I had thought I would never be able to get up, but by the grace of God, I did get up stronger than ever. But what I owe myself now is forgiving Jim for the distraction that he had caused my life. I really want to move on, but it seems like there is something pulling me back, and it is longing for Jim. Please help me because I really don't know how I can approach Jim. Please advise me on this one.